Okay. So, for those of you who haven't met me, I know some of you have, but some of you haven't met me. I'm Adam, I'm a photographer of 21 years. Excited to have the opportunity to teach you all how to take better photos. Some people on this course have been with me before. The majority of people are new. This is an intro to photography class. So we're going to be starting right from the beginning. So for some of you, this may, especially today's class, maybe a little bit of repeat of some stuff that you've heard before, especially if you've taken a class with me. But I think repetition and reinforcement is very good because I think it's a really good way to learn. And we need to do that to ensure that the whole group is at the same level, and I can move everyone together over the subsequent three classes. Hi, Anne. Nice to see you.
Hi, how are you?
Good. I'm very well, thank you. So what I'd love to do, I always start off all my lessons with a new group, is I'd love to go around the room because some of you may know each other, some of you may not know each other. It's quite nice to, we've got a nice sized group here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go around the room as I see you. Feel free to unmute yourself. I'd love to just know your name and for the benefit of the group, where you're from, where you're based, and what you enjoy taking photographs of. So let's start with Shirley, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shirley Francis. I'm president of Late Bloomers Garden Club in Jacksonville, Florida. And I love taking pictures of almost everything, but anything in nature and children are probably my two favorites.
Great, thank you. Oh, and one other question I should ask. Just, I think everyone in this group has, but can you just let me know either if you have a camera, and it's fine if you don't, or if you have a phone, if you have an iPhone?
Uh,
Shirley.
yes, so I have both, but I tend to use my iPhone the most.
Great. Okay, good. Let's go. Thank you. Let's go to Judy.
I'm Judy Monaco from the Garden Club of Halifax Country, and I am using my iPhone, and I can't seem to find my obviously I am unmuted, but I can't find my mute button.
It's right next to
I found it.
the video button down at the bottom.
Yes.
You got it.
Yes.
Good.
Thank you.
And I will call on you all as we move through the class. So if you haven't got background noise or things, feel free to keep yourself off mute so you don't have to keep on turning it on and off. But if you've got stuff going on in your house or in your yard, feel free to mute yourself. Okay, Carrie, hi.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carrie Lanier. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm in Cherokee Garden Club, and I mainly shoot with an iPhone. And like others, I really like nature, florals, and then my children. I have three younger children. Um, and I'm pretty like I'm a pretty good photographer. So this day I might be picking up a few new things, but I already have like a pretty good sense of my iPhone. So we'll see what I have to learn
Good.
today.
There's always new things to learn, Carrie. I'm sure you'll pick up new things. And as I say, I think repetition is and a big part of photography is learning to see better. And there's a great phrase that by a famous French street photographer called Henri Cartier-Bresson that says your first 10,000 photographs are your worst. It could be your first 100,000 or your first 1 million photographs. It doesn't matter. I think we're always learning as photographers and learning how to see, compose, understand light. So I hope that you got a better starters. Bless you, Jan.
Thank you.
We'll come to you then, Jan.
Thank you. I was hoping I would get your attention. I'm just kidding. Jan Cochran. I'm in the Garden Club of Halifax Country, and I'm a newbie. I'm loving learning. I love to take pictures of nature. That's my favorite thing. It would be my grandkids, but they're not near me. So anyway, I have an iPhone, and that's what I use. I'm hoping to upgrade so I can get a newer model that has the raw
The raw capability.
yeah, raw capability. Yes, thank you.
Great. Thank you. Meredith.
Hey, I'm Meredith Vincent. I'm also with the Garden Club of the Halifax Country in Ormond Beach. I'm brand new to learning anything useful with photography, and I like to take pictures of flowers.
Did we lose Adam?
Yes, we did.
He left.
Overwhelming group.
Hold on. Sorry, everyone. I'm here. My internet went down and then it went out again. I'm back. Did you all lose me? Sorry, Meredith, I got the first part of you. Can you just repeat it for my benefit, just because I'm making notes?
Okay. I'm also in Ormond Beach with the Halifax Country Garden Club, and I like to take pictures of flowers, and I know nothing about any kind of finesse in photography.
Okay, great. Let's go to Carol, please. Carol.
Oh, me. Oh, sorry.
Hi.
Also, Ormond Beach Garden Club of the Halifax Country. And I have a camera, a little Leica, and also a very old iPhone. I like flowers, taking pictures of flowers. And this weekend, it will be sports cars because there's a race going on in Daytona Beach. But I'm not there today because it's too cold.
Is that the Daytona 500?
No, I don't do that. Not NASCAR. It's a 24-hour, the sports cars.
Oh, wow, that's exciting. Yeah, I hear it's very cold in Florida at the moment.
Yeah.
Unseasonably cold.
Yeah.
You're getting like Bay Area weather.
Yes.
Jean, how about you, please?
Yes, well, I'm also a member of the Cherokee Garden Club, and I like I use my iPhone and I also use my iPad, and I enjoy taking pictures of gardens and flowers and animals and most everything. And yesterday they had a controlled burn in front of my house in I'm living in Serenbe at the moment, and that was interesting to get shots of the controlled burn and the smoke and things like that. Anyway,
but luckily, thank
like
you.
to experiment with
Luckily, it was a controlled burn and not like
Yes.
not an out of
Exactly.
control burn, which is what we have in California. But yes, that would have been very interesting. Anne, hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
I'm a repeat. I'm from Grass River Garden Club in Delray Beach, Florida. I live on the ocean, and one of my favorite things is the skyscape and the ocean, birds flying around or on the sand. So I'm a birder too. But in any case, I'm looking forward to continuing with you and learning as much as possible.
Yeah, excellent. Good. And as I
I
say,
hope you got my emails.
yeah, sorry, yeah, I
Okay.
know some of you but yes, I think I know what you're referring to.
We'll be in touch.
We'll be in touch.
Thank you. It's great to be here again.
Yeah, nice to see you. Okay, Cassidy, if you wouldn't mind, if you possibly can take yourself off mute and even better, turn your video on, that would be great.
I turned the video on.
Oh, I think, hold on, let's do Cassidy first and then we'll do Muffy. So Cassidy, if you can turn your video on down here, don't worry if you can't, we can hear you. If you want to tell everyone where you're from and what you enjoy taking photos of, that would be great.
Where do you turn the video on?
It's down on the bottom left of your screen. There's a like a icon of a video and it says video.
It's not working.
You may have something blocking your webcam.
Okay. Oh, I bet I know what it is.
Don't worry, we can hear you.
Okay. There we go.
And now we can see you. I cannot tell you.
I'm here. I'm alive.
How many people
I'm from Jacksonville, Florida also. I'm in same garden club as Shirley. And I enjoy taking pictures of things in nature.
Good. Fantastic. Great. And last but not least, hi, Muffy. You just joined while we were just doing some introductions. So everyone gets to know each other. I'd just love to know where you're based and what you enjoy taking photos of, please.
I'm from Ormond Beach, Florida. I'm in the Garden Club of Halifax Country, and I am interested in learning more about photography.
Great. Very good. And do you have an iPhone, Muffy?
I do.
Great. So let's just do, for my benefit, just raise your hands if you don't have an iPhone. Okay, great. So everyone in the group hasn't on the iPhone. That makes things easy. Okay, we've got quite a few people here. Also, quite a few people listening to the recording. So hello to everyone listening to the recording. I'll just do some housekeeping first, just to let you know, for those of you who haven't been on my courses before, how I usually work. So each course, you guys all have the dates. Each course is 2 hours long. At the end of each class, I'm going to set you everyone an assignment. And my hope is that part of my job is to get you excited and enthused to go out and take pictures. I'd like you to go and photograph around that assignment before the next class. And if possible, send me 2 to 3 of your favorites or ones that you were having challenges with. You can just email them to me. You've all got my email. I'll give you the theme at the end of the class. We'll see how we do today. And I usually ask for a homework assignment at the end of every class. And then we review those as a group, and I use people's pictures as basis for whatever theme I'm teaching in that particular follow-up class. One small point of note, when you email them, especially if you're emailing them from your phone, even from your computer, please try your phone will give you the prompt. Do you want to send them small, medium, large, or original size? Please send them to me in original size, because that means when I show them on the screen and then you will get to look at them in the computer, we don't see them tiny, we see them really big. If for some reason, again, this happens and I get crossed about this a lot, sometimes you'll try to do that and it will say, can't send because it's too large. Do you want to use mail drop? That's just probably because you're trying to send me 3 at the same time and they're too big. So just send them in separate emails, just send one at a time. In fact, good practice, just easier if you just want to send one at a time, it's fine. Every class will be recorded. Everyone who's here today, but also everyone who's listening to the recording, and if you can't make a class in the future, good for you to know while you're here. I distribute the recordings to the whole class, everyone, every attendee, the night of that lesson concluding. So you'll get a recording tonight. That's a private recording, so only those who have signed up for the class can access it. It will be tied to your emails that you signed up for. If for any reason you want me to send it to a different email, please let me know, because again, I've had sometimes people have issues in the past that they've signed up with one email and then they try to access it and they're on a different computer or something, and then it says access denied. If you're getting that message, it's probably because you have 2 emails. So if you do run into that issue, please email me, let me know, and I'll send you the recording to the other email. All the recordings are kept online for 90 days, so 3 months after the course. So you've got 3 months to go back and watch them at your leisure. What a lot of people tend to do and I'll tell you a little bit about me in a minute, but I've taught photography for over 20 years, both in person and remotely. I was doing remote way before it was trendy to do remote with the pandemic. I've always found it a very effective way to show lots of people pictures and help you learn. Photography is a very visual language. But after 90 days, the recordings will then expire. So please take advantage of that 3-month period. I may say things that may be a little bit too quick for you at the first time. If you go over it the second time, it may make more sense to you. Lots of people write notes. That's why I like to see people, because I can see who's writing notes, who's not writing notes. I can either slow down or speed up. One thing I'll say before we start is this time is your time, not my time. Oh, it is my time, but it's your time. So I want to ensure that if I'm talking about anything, if anything's not making sense, if you're not clear on anything, if anything I say is confusing, please I can see everyone, so just raise your hands and just put your hand up like this, and I'll see you, and I'll probably just finish my train of thought, and then I'll come to you. But I want to make sure it's very important when we have a group like this that I don't leave anyone behind. So I want to make sure that no one feels like this is too advanced for them. At the same time, for those of you, as I say, who've taken courses with me before, especially today's lesson, probably not lesson 2, 3, and 4, but today's lesson, a lot will be familiar territory, because I have to make sure that the 70% of other people who are joining this intro to photography class, everyone's at the same level. And when I start talking about concepts, that everyone understands what we're talking about. Does anyone have any questions about logistics? One thing that I also remembered is it will be the same Zoom link for all 4 classes. So I usually send people a reminder anyway. Also, usually the day before, I'll send everyone a reminder and I'll say, just a reminder, your class is tomorrow. Here's the Zoom link. But if you want to bookmark it, feel free to bookmark it. It will be the same one for all 4 sessions. I've just created just this Zoom link for this group for these 4 workshops. Great. Muffy, your camera is, I'm not quite sure. We're looking at a finger and a chair, I think. But you may want to move your, I'm not sure if, Muffy, are you on a computer or an iPad?
No, I'm on a computer, a regular computer. So
Do you have an external webcam or is it built into your computer?
it's built in.
Okay, so yeah, so you should be able to just again make sure, like sometimes people have the little, like Cassidy had the thing that was hiding her, like sometimes, and other people, like we have that at the beginning. Just make sure that you have like, it should be like right on top of your screen. If anything's blocking the lens, try to move it, but no worries if you can't, don't worry.
Okay. Can you see me?
No, we can't see you. We just see darkness.
Okay. All right.
But don't worry, you can play around with it. I'm going to get started for the benefit.
Okay. As long as I can see you, I'm okay.
As long as you can see me and as long as everyone can hear me, that's the most important.
Okay.
Okay, so I am going to share my screen. Can I just have a thumbs up from everyone that you can see my screen okay?
Yeah.
Great. And then I'm just going to draw on my screen, and I just want to make sure that everyone can see my red drawings before I start. Everyone can see GCA, right?
Yep.
Perfect. Good. Fantastic. Okay, so let's get started. So especially with an introductory class, what I tend to find that sometimes happens is people want to run or sprint before they can even crawl or walk. Photography is really creating good photographs, and really good photography, creating good photography is always done with intention. And once we start to understand some of the guidelines, or you can think of it as like ingredients that go into making a good photograph, then we have to do it gradually. I always say, like, creating a good photograph is like building a tower of Lego or like layering a cake. We can't build the tower straight away at the beginning. We need the foundational blocks. So we're going to take things one step at a time. We're going to go nice and slowly. I'm going to cover quite a broad array of things today in terms of like what goes into making a good photograph. And that's going to act as the foundation for the rest of the course. A little bit about me. As I said, I'm a professional photographer for 22 years. I now can say I photographed every living president other than Trump. So I do portraiture. I've been the official photographer for Super Bowls, Olympics. But I do a lot of landscape photography, a lot of floral photography. I'm an accredited speaker with the GCA, and I've been working with the GCA for 5 or 6 years now. So a long time. So I'm very well versed in the type of contests that you guys get asked to enter, like how GCA works, especially on the photography side. So any questions you have there, I know a lot of logistical questions come up on how to size images, how to get them right for particular contests or shows that you want to enter. We can definitely make sure we cover that as we move through the course. So if you have any particular questions, I would feel free to email them to me. I will try my best to incorporate them into this 4-piece workshop for you. Kind of if there's anything you've been dying to know. Great. So with that, let's dive in. And some of you would have seen this photo already in a minute coming up. But the whole theme of today is I want to help all of you make your photograph stand out. I don't want to be standing at the beach and we're all together in person, that there's 15 of us and we're all standing exactly the same way, taking the same picture of the sunrise or the sunset or the turtle on the beach or whatever it may be. The question is, how do we create something that's eye-catching? How do we create something that's unique? How do we create something that's different? And there's tons of different ways to think about creating better photography. And the beauty is for all of you is, I like to say the best camera is the one you have on you, which for most of you is your iPhone. The iPhone has made leaps and bounds in terms of how good it is as a camera, especially over the last 5 years. It's kind of like the iPhone used to be a great telephone that took okay pictures. It's almost the other way around now. It's now an amazing camera that has the byproduct that it can make phone calls. They've made huge leaps and bounds in what you can do with the iPhone. And we'll spend quite a bit of time on the technical stuff on the iPhone, but we're also going to spend the majority of today on the conceptual stuff. Another way to put it is a lot of today's lesson will be why we do certain things in photography. And then the subsequent 3 lessons that come up will be more to do with how do we do it. But I need you to understand the why before you understand the how to do it. Otherwise, we don't know what we're trying to do. So,
Yes, we do.
you have a question now?
No, I don't.
Oh, no, you're good. So, question is, how do we think about what makes a good photograph? Whether we're taking pictures of our pets, our families, our kids, flowers, food, wildlife, landscapes, it doesn't matter. The concepts I'm going to teach you are applicable to all genres of photography. Obviously, this is a garden club, so I'm going to focus a little bit on floral. But
do you have pictures up on the screen right now?
No, it's completely empty.
Okay.
Don't worry, it's just me talking. They're coming. Thank you for holding me honest, though, Carrie. I lost my train of thought now. What was I going to say? So what I'm going to teach you is applicable to all genres of photography, because I ultimately want to make each one of you the best version of the photographer that you can be. And you're all going to enjoy taking pictures of different things. And at the same time, it's very important to note that I don't want to make you a clone of me. So I don't want to make you see the world exactly how I see the world. My job is to give you the tools, and Jan is going to see the world different to Anne, who's going to see the different world to Carol, to Meredith, to Carrie, to Cassidy. Like, we're all going to see the world differently. And that's great. That's part of what's going to make your photos unique. And the more you practice, the better you will become at understanding how you like to see the world through the conduit of a camera's lens. Again, a good phrase that I like telling people is the best camera is the 2 inches behind it, i.e. you. So the cameras are amazing. The iPhone's great. But if you don't know what you're trying to do, you're not really going to take better pictures. So ultimately, we have to do the thinking. And we have to understand how intentionally we can go about creating good photos. And the first place to think about what goes into making a good bless you, is we can look at it in a number of different ways. Again, I know a few of you have seen this before. The majority of people won't have seen this. So the first way we can see it is monetarily. So up until a couple of years ago, this was the world's most expensive photograph. Just over actually $5 million. So someone or a whole group of people thought this was a good image. Let's ask, you can all unmute yourselves. Let's ask Shirley. Shirley, because you're new to the group, what do you think? Anything in this photo, what do you think makes it a good photo, if anything?
I don't see the photo.
You can't see the photo? Can everyone else see it?
Yes.
We'll ask, maybe just click on the Zoom icon at the bottom of your screen, Shirley, and it'll pop right up. Let's ask Judy while Shirley's trying to get it back.
Well, I've seen this before.
Yeah.
But what makes it a good photo to me was the different textures.
Yeah, very good. That's a good photography word. So we've clearly got like strong different textures. Good. What about Cassidy? Because you may not have seen this before. Anything here, Cassidy, that you think makes this a good photograph? And lots of people I show this to, by the way, say, I hate it. If I took this on my iPhone, I'd probably delete it. That's okay. I'm just showing it to you because lots of people thought it was good. Any ideas, Cassidy? You may want to unmute yourself. You're on mute, Cassidy. You're on mute. While we're waiting for, there we go. You're off mute now, Cassidy. Hi.
It's very linear.
It is very linear. That's a good word. Very good photography word. So it's very linear. So we have these strong horizontal lines. Lines are another thing that we're going to look at a lot, and how we can use lines in photography. So this is an interesting photograph. This is taken by, again, you'll see through my teaching, I love to show my own work, but I think it's as important to show other artists' work and other photographers' work. That makes you more of a well-rounded photographer. And then I'm providing you with a education into different photographers. This is a photographer called Andreas Gursky, Gursky. You can see his name there down at the bottom. He's a German fine art photographer, very well known. You can look him up. But a lot of his work, how he likes to see the world, is he loves seeing the world in layers. So he sees the world very much with layered lines. And he takes lots of pictures of landscapes, buildings, but you'll see this layering used a lot in his work. And what layering often does in photography is it helps provide depth. What we don't want is we don't want a photograph to look too two-dimensional. We want it to, and it's hard these days because everything we look at is on a screen. It's not even like a printed photograph, but even through the screen or whether you print it, we want there to be some dimension and depth behind it. And there's lots of ways we can achieve that in photography, one of which is repeating linear lines. So well done, Cassidy. Yeah, that's right. Let me ask Shirley, can you just give me a thumbs up? Shirley, can you see the picture now? Good. Great. Let's ask Carrie. I see you writing some notes. Carrie, how does it make you feel when you see this picture, if anything? And you're on mute.
A little melancholy.
Yeah, good. So a lot of people say melancholy, a lot of people say calm, a lot of people actually look at this picture and they kind of say it makes them feel nothing. However it makes you feel, everyone's going to feel differently. It's an important point in that often in photography, we want to make the viewer feel something. I'm going to give you guys lots of different tools today and how we can make people feel something when they look at our photographs. Sometimes it's through color. Sometimes it's through composition. Sometimes it's through light. There's tons of different things. But if we can tell our story in our photography and make people feel something, and that's not every picture you're going to take, but for a proportion of pictures, that's going to make things much more effective. Interestingly, this is of the River Rhine in Germany. So this is the river inside my red rectangle here. This is the River Rhine. And the guy Gursky who took this picture, with the original picture, there was like a bunch of factories and houses over here, and he photoshopped them all out. He took them all out. He actually wanted to take them out because he wanted you to look at this picture and feel a bit like, ugh, a bit like nothingness. It was meant to be this big comment on how the industry had moved out of rural Germany, out of the German countryside, and had left it feeling very soul. That was his message when he took this picture. Does it deserve to be the world's second most expensive photograph? I'm not sure. That's up for debate. But it's interesting place to start if we're thinking about the theme of today, which is what makes a good photograph. This is one way to look at it, which is monetarily. It was replaced by this picture. Shirley, I'll ask you, where does your eye go in this picture straight away?
Right in the center.
Good.
The light coming right to the middle.
Very good. So it goes right here to the center. Now it goes to the center for two reasons. It goes because it's smack bang in the center, but primarily it goes to the center because it is the brightest part of the photograph. And the brightest part of the photograph we usually call a highlight.
Mm-hmm.
The darkest part we usually call the shadows. So we go from shadows to highlights. We tend to get drawn to the highlight first. I'm going to teach you lots of photography words today. Highlight's one. Highlight just means the bright parts of our images. Most of the time, if you went out, I don't know how, it may be a bit gloomy in Florida or up on the East Coast today, but most of the time, the highlight is the sky. A lot of the time, because that's usually the brightest thing if we're outside in our photographs. But if we're inside and we're taking a picture of a rose, maybe it's just like one petal has the light particularly hitting it in a beautiful way and it's lighting it up. That would be our highlight, and that's tend to where the eye gets drawn. So here, as fairly correctly identified, the artist Peter Lik, he's an Australian fine art photographer, very famous for landscapes. Again, you can look him up. His name's down here, Lik, L-I-K. He has a number of galleries in Florida, up the East Coast, in New York, on the West Coast. He's actually global. But he's taken this picture here inside a slot canyon in Utah. So the story goes that he had one of his assistants standing here. You'll soon learn I'm a good photographer, but my drawings are like my 2-year-olds, but hopefully it makes sense to you. And there was a cave with the sunlight coming in here. He got his assistant to throw up some dust into the light. And when he threw up some dust, he caught the moment. And one of the things photography gives us the innate ability to do that we can't really do in any other art form is freeze a moment. We'll talk about that in a minute, why we do it and how we do it. But here, Peter Lik has frozen this moment. And the reason he liked this picture was, if you can see, the photograph is called Phantom, is there's kind of like a ghost-like human figure that you can see floating in the air there, which he was very drawn to. Jan, why else do you think our eye will be drawn to that central pillar of dust and light? Is there anything else going on in this picture?
Well, two things, I think. One is the way the image is framed.
Good, very good.
Rock, and just that it's centered.
Good, both good points. The first one was the one I was hoping you'd pick up on. So he's very intentionally here framed the image. Framing is something we use a lot in photography. You'll hear me talk about it a lot. Much like you would frame a piece of art to draw the eye's attention to the main subject, we often use frames in photography to take the viewer's attention to the main subject. And again, to use another photography word, the main subject you'll often hear referred to in photography as the focal point. So you'll hear me talk about focal point a lot, and how can we best take the viewer's attention to the focal point. Framing is one, lighting is another. Peter Lik has taken advantage of both of these here to draw us to the focal point. Out of interest, oh, hello, Melissa. You wouldn't mind just turning your video camera on down at the bottom? That would be great. Out of interest, show of hands, who prefers picture number 1? Okay, who prefers picture number 2? Okay, so the majority of people. Most people fall that way, but there's no, again, it's art. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just always interesting. So let's talk about what, I'm going to skip through these pretty quickly. But let's talk about what photography can do. I've already talked about it briefly, is that we can freeze moments. Now, it doesn't have to be like, this is an iconic photograph on the left-hand side of the girl kissing the sailor in D-Day in Times Square, taken by a famous German photographer called Alfred Eisenstadt. He lived off this photograph for like 70 years. And then he unfortunately passed away a few years ago. And in his memoirs, he later came out and said, actually, I got the sailor and I got the girl and I put them together and I asked them to kiss. And it was lauded as like the greatest candid. You'll hear the word candid used a lot. Candid just means unposed. The greatest candid photograph of like the 20th century. Ironically, the guy put it together. Doesn't matter. Point is, it still immortalizes a moment in time. Same with this one on the right. This one on the right is much more somber. There's for those of you who like photojournalism or documenting street life, or travel is another big one that I often find that people want to document their travels and different cultures. There's an elite group of photojournalists called Magnum, M-A-G-N-U-M. Again, you can look them up. If you just Google Magnum photography, you'll see them come up. And one of their founders was a guy called Eddie Adams in the 60s. And this photograph was obviously taken way before the internet, and pictures went around the world in a minute. And this photograph was widely accredited for bringing American consciousness to what was going on in Vietnam at the time, and then everything that subsequently happened afterwards. It's like these two photos. I'm completely apolitical. I'm English. I don't get involved in American politics. But the photo of Trump on the right blows my mind as a photographer because it looks so staged. It's almost so perfect in all the parts of it that have come together that it looks like someone created it in a photography studio, whether it's like the red blood on his face and the red flag. Look how he's framed by the Secret Service agents. Look how the brightest part of the picture is his head and his fist to draw our attention in there. So when you look at this photo, you get sucked right in to the focal point, his face. Very important. Photo on the left is, again, one way we can think about what's popular in photography or what makes a good photograph is popularity. This was when the internet was just being born in 2001. This was the most popular picture, the most viewed picture on the internet in 2001. Most of you, I probably don't have to tell you where this was taken in order to be able to identify it. It's the Twin Towers, it's 9/11. It's a shocking photograph. It was viewed by many people, so lots of people, it created a reaction in them. It told a story, what we talked about with that original photograph I showed you of the River Rhine. Interestingly, I like showing this picture to people, but it's actually fake. Someone put it together. Doesn't matter. The point is that the principles of evoking a reaction and freezing moments in time stand true. Let me ask amongst the group, who, if anyone, uses Instagram? Put your hand up if you use Instagram. Okay, so a few of us. Okay, so probably about 40% of the people here. Doesn't matter if you do or you don't. Doesn't matter to me. What's important is that Instagram is the most used place in the world that photographs are shared. And one way we can think about makes a good photograph is what's popular on Instagram. And these are currently 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. These are the most liked pictures on Instagram. Now, a lot of them are related to celebrity, whether it's a soccer player or whether it's the cast of Friends #5, which kind of tells you something about our culture and how we're like how people are obsessed with celebrity. But I like #2. I like this one, and I like using this to teach people stuff. Because #2, the internet banded together and was like, we're going to do something funny. We're going to create a picture of an egg. And it's been liked how many times? As of yesterday, it's 54,889,000 people have liked this picture. Mind blowing. That's like the whole population of the UK, where I'm originally from, has liked a picture of an egg. Now, it's comedic and it's meant to invoke a funny reaction in you. But the reason I like it is because I love using the analogy of an egg to teach people how to take better photographers. So I'm going to pretend my Gatorade bottle here is an egg. Most people, especially those of you who've probably never taken a class with me, and that's lots of people listening to this recording, is all too often when we take a picture, we hold our phones or our cameras. Most people, by the way, always hold their phone like this now. They take pictures like this. They never think to turn it this way. So remember, you can take portrait and landscape photos. Actually, a little tip to take landscape photos on an iPhone. If you turn your phone like this, all you've got to do is hit the increase volume button, the one at the top here, and that will take the picture for you. So it acts, so you can hold it like a camera. You don't have to like get your hand and try to get it onto the gray button. And for those of you who've got a latest iPhone, you actually have a special button on your camera, on your phone at the top here, that's specifically designed as a shutter button. It lets you take the picture. But all too often when people take pictures, whatever they're taking pictures of, dogs, flowers, people, landscapes, it's like our feet are stuck in cement. Occasionally people go this way and they go this way. Sometimes they go up a little bit, sometimes they go down, but they don't think to move. And the reason I like the egg is often when I teach workshops, I teach everyone from beginners like this group all the way up to high-end professionals. I work and teach professionals who will come into my workshops with $20,000 of lighting. Sometimes I say all the gear and no idea. Sometimes they have an idea, but sometimes not. But I'll give everyone an egg, a really mundane subject. And I'll say, you've got 5 minutes to take 10, 20, 30 different pictures of the egg, but you can't use any of your fancy equipment or any fancy camera settings that you may think you know. And the key to doing that, and that could be my Gatorade bottle, is the fact that we have to start moving. A huge word in creating better photography is perspective. The minute, and by I say moving, I mean we have to come closer, we have to go far away, we have to go above, we have to go below, we have to look around. As I move around the egg or the Gatorade bottle or someone's face or a flower, you're going to see the lighting change. You're going to see the colors change. You're going to see how big or small the subject that you're taking a picture of is. And often when we take pictures of things from below, they look huge. Generally, don't take pictures of your family and friends from below. They'll hate you. But if we want to take a picture of a flower and we want it to look really imposing, we can go down lower. And actually the iPhone has a great trick on it, that if you go to your cameras and you just turn them upside down, so you just literally just, when you're in the camera, if you just flip the camera around this, the thing that you see on the screen will flip at the same time. And what's that designed to do is it's so you can get your lenses on your camera down to a lower angle. So you're gaining like 8 to 10 inches of lower perspective just by going like that, because lots of people don't want to lie on the floor or like get dirty in the mulch and the mud trying to take a picture, but achieve a lower perspective. For example, this picture on the left, this is a very famous photograph of Bill Clinton, taken by a portrait photographer, very well known, called Platon, Platon, like the philosopher. He got commissioned by Esquire magazine, go and take some pictures of Bill Clinton, and we'd love you to get headshots of him. So he went, he took all his headshots. This was in the 90s, right in the middle of all the Monica Lewinsky scandal. And the very last picture before Bill Clinton left, the photographer lay on his belly in front of Bill Clinton's feet. He said, "Show me the money, Mr. President." Bill Clinton opened up his legs and he took the picture. And look at Bill Clinton's hands. Like, look how huge they look. Like look at his legs. Like he looks massive. He looks like he's imposing. Often politicians, athletes, CEOs, whenever you see people who want to look powerful, interestingly, actually, maybe I'll show it to you next time. Trump's official inauguration portrait that he just released, it's the first one ever to be taken from below and also lit from below. You can look it up. And he's done that because he wants to project through the image strength, power. Like, he doesn't want, the opposite is like when we're taking a selfie and we hold our cameras up here because we want to look more slender, we want to look more dainty, we want to look smaller. So it's very interesting. There's been a lot of chatter amongst that. Maybe I'll show that to you next time. You can just Google it. You can just look up Trump inauguration portrait and you'll see it pop up. But it's lit from below and it's like goes against all the conventional rules that you do to make someone look quote unquote pretty. It's almost like a Halloween light that's like lighting him up from below rather than from above. Regardless, the point I'm trying to make here is, if you take anything away from today, just learning to move and appreciating that you need to move or zoom with your feet, I sometimes say. Don't just be lazy and zoom the iPhone. I'll teach you how to zoom the iPhone in a minute and different ways we can control the iPhone. But moving and changing our perspective is a fantastic way to start creating better photographs. It sounds the easiest. It's probably the one that people do the least. So just really think about whatever you're taking a picture of. And the beauty of an iPhone or any digital camera is taking the photos are free. We can take as many as we want. The only downside is storage. But I want you, when you're looking at a subject, to take 5, 10, 15 different pictures of the thing, change your angle, change it, see which one you like the best. Remember though, shooting things from below make things look bigger. Shooting things from above usually makes things look smaller or produces just a totally different type of image. Here I was on this beach. I was like, I could take a picture from the beach, but instead I'm going to get in my car and I'm going to drive up because it was a very windy day and the waves were coming in and I wanted to show the different layers and the different colors. And I needed to get above in order to see that. Lots of people always say to me, Adam, I'm going to London. What should I take pictures of? Like, give me recommendations. And I usually say to people, just look up, because there's so much we miss by walking around like a blinkered horse, and we're all busy and we're doing stuff, but don't forget to look up, and also don't forget to look down, because there's usually pretty interesting things that you can photograph like at your feet as well as up in the sky, whether it's buildings or architecture or lines. So it's all about changing our perspective. This is a really interesting picture, but this was taken about 2 years ago, and this went viral on the internet because this is perspective done badly. So on our iPhones, just to talk iPhones for a minute, can everyone open the camera up on their iPhone, please? And on your iPhone, when you open the camera, you'll see down at the bottom, just above where you take a picture, you should see it says 0.5, 1, and 3. depending on which iPhone you've got. Some of you, it will say 0.5, 1, 3, and 5. Those are your different lenses that you have on your iPhone. So you can think about an iPhone like a traditional camera where you could take a lens off and then put another one back on. The difference with the iPhone is they're all built in, which is great because it means we don't have to carry around 3 lenses. And if you all hit the 0.5 one, which is to the left, and you're pointing it at the computer, or anyway, you're pointing it, suddenly it's going to feel like you've pulled out, like you've gone further away. You're going to see a wider field of view. That's the wide angle lens. That's this one on your camera. Wide angle lenses are amazing when we're at the beach, when we're doing landscapes, but they're terrible when we're photographing people. And this picture went viral because look at Jimmy Carter's feet. They look enormous down here, right? They look really weird. Look how Joe Biden looks like a giant. Like the whole picture is distorted. So wide angle lenses, I'm going to teach you how to use them as we move through, but hitting today, hopefully everyone could find that 0.5. And if you hit the 3, it's going to zoom in on the picture. It's a telephoto lens. That's a zoom lens that's built into your iPhone. So you have 0.5, you have 1, and you have 3. The 0.5 is the wide angle. The 1 is what we call the mid-range. The 1 tries to recreate a 35mm camera, which is kind of how we see the world. And then the 3 is a telephoto lens, which allows us to zoom in on things that are further away from us. As in, like, if you want to zoom in on a bird on the tree, or you want to zoom in on a flower. Okay, so we just got to be careful with distortion that we do it properly. So let's look at how changing perspective can be really effective. This is in Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. It's a pretty picture of some flowers. I took this when I was on a group workshop with some attendees. And most people, I said, let's take some pictures of this. And most people took the picture that you're looking at. I then said to everyone, how about we move a little bit to our right, maybe 3 steps, and we drop a little bit lower. And straight away, we went from this to this. Same place. Picture is taken 10 seconds apart. It's just moving. I mean, there's other things with focus and various things that we'll learn to do. But the key is you've got to see it first, and you've got to understand that you need to move. And shifting our perspective is, as I would argue, one of the most powerful weapons we have as a photographer. So let's use it. And you'll hear me talk about it a lot. Okay, does that make sense to anyone? Does anyone have any questions on that? Okay, good. So let's look at question for today. What makes a good photograph? The first one is lighting. I would argue that lighting is the foundation of photography. In fact, the word photography comes from the Greek painting or drawing with light. We really have to appreciate what the light is doing to be able to create a better photograph. And I usually break that, you can all write this down into, let's call it for today, 2 main buckets. Direction of light. Where's the light coming from? And number 2 is intensity of light. How strong or how weak the light is. Now, when we're inside, as we all are at the moment, there's usually going to be a few different sources of light. You're going to have light from the window, but you're going to have light from your home. Maybe it's a lamp, maybe it's lights in your ceiling. Like, each one is giving off a different type of light, both in terms of its strength and the direction it's coming from. But let's take direction first. I know for some of you, this is going to be a good reminder. For most of you, this is going to be brand new. So direction of light. The easiest way that I can teach everyone how to understand where light should be coming from and how to take best advantage of an iPhone is to think about the analogy of a clock. And when we think about the analogy of the clock, we think about that our subject, in fact, I'll draw a flower here to make it easier, that our subject, which I'll do in green, so here's a flower, our subject is in the middle of the clock, the center of the clock face. And we are always at 6 o'clock taking a picture of the flower. Let me ask Melissa, if you can take yourself off mute. Don't worry if you can't. Oh, there we go. Hey, Melissa. So I've purposely let Melissa, can you see if you can turn your video on as well so we can all see you? It's right next to where you just unmuted yourself. There we go. Perfect. We can see you. Great. Thank you. So I purposely left some numbers off the clock here, and not to put you on the spot. Don't worry. There's no wrong answers here. But where do you think we ideally want the light to be coming from in order for us to create the strongest photograph? We're at 6 and the flower is in the middle.
Probably like at 8 or 4.
Good.
Or 10 and 2. But 8 and 4.
Good. Let's stick with your first answer, 8 and 4. So ideally, you're right, especially for the iPhone. But in all situations, it makes life so much easier if we have the light coming from behind us as the photographer, usually at a bit of an angle, so at 4, 5, 7, or 8, shining onto the subject. If ever any of you have ever been into a photography studio before and someone's taken your picture, it's likely that the photographer's had lights behind them shining onto you. If you're inside and you want to take a picture of some food, a still life, a flower, I want you to position your backs to a window. Take advantage of the lovely, soft, diffused light coming from a window and let that light your subject. At the moment, I have a window straight in front of me, so I'm pretty evenly, nicely lit. If I turn the camera around the other way, I'd be really dull and flat. So we really want to try our hardest not to fight the light. And fighting the light, which sometimes we have to do because we can't move, but fighting the light often means that the light is coming into our camera. That's coming from 11, 10, 1, or 2. Shining into the camera. We call this, or another way of putting it is it's shining into the back of the subject. So this is a whole genre of photography called backlit photography, which is effective. It's just much harder to do. And especially because this is a beginner's class, an intro, I want to start off with the easy to get you guys confident. So for the time being, if we can, I want us to shift our perspective. And I want us to move our perspective so that the light is coming from one of 4, 5, 7, or 8 behind us at a slight angle. And you can see this, like, I don't know if it's sunny today, but on a sunny day, if you go out and you stand with your back to the sun, everything that the sun's shining on is going to look very saturated, very vibrant, like you're going to have interesting shadows and highlights, and it's all going to look very defined. If you look the other way into the sun and you look at a landscape, everything's going to look very flat. It's going to look very dull. It's going to look very boring. So we want to try and avoid that if we can. And the clock analogy, from lots of years of teaching, I've tended to found the most effective way to get people to think about where's the light coming from. Make sense to everyone? Anyone got any questions?
Mm-hmm.
Good. Okay. So let's move on to number 2. You may remember I said lighting, there's 2 things I want to think about. Direction. And the second one is intensity. How weak or how strong the light is. Now, obviously, you're all going to be out and about. Hopefully, you're going to want to take pictures of different things that you see. But the time of day is very important in when we take photographs for creating interesting eclectic, authentic, eye-catching imagery. We generally tend to want to avoid, if we can, this, as I say, you could be photographing a vase of roses in your kitchen, or you could be photographing the beach, or you could be photographing your dog outside. It doesn't matter. But if we photograph at like 12 o'clock, I've just put the flashlight on my phone here. If we photograph at 12 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, the light tends to be at its strongest. Makes sense, right? As the sun gets higher in the sky, it gets stronger, like it's at its most intense, 11, 12, 1, 2, which does two things. One, where it's coming from doesn't create very interesting pictures because it's very overhead. So we get an absence of shadowing. And shadowing is one of those things that helps add layering and depth, like I talked about with the original River Rhine picture I showed you, the Gursky picture. Ideally, we want to take out, so if you imagine, here's my light, you can kind of see it lighting up the top of my head here. I want to take my light and I want to get it so it lights me up like this. Not like this, I want it down here. And to get it, and again, my face could be a flower, a dog, a food, a plate of food, it doesn't matter. Ideally, we want to take our pictures on the first 4 hours after sunrise and the last 4 hours before sunset. That's still giving you 8 hours of the day to take pictures. That's a lot. And sometimes that's not feasible because we're on our travels and we see an amazing thing at 1 o'clock and we want to take a picture of it. Of course, I want you to take a picture of it. But if we have a choice, you're going to create much more interesting imagery taking towards the start of the day or the latter of the part of the day than you will in the middle of the day. And it's because not only the direction of the sun, but the sun is weaker. And because the sun is weaker, and this is really relevant to iPhones, the iPhone finds it much easier to handle than the really bright, glaring sun. Now, one thing I will say that just reminded me of is the iPhones as I say, they've got really, really good, but they're still not great. The one place they always fall down on still is in low light. So if I'll give you an example. I was teaching some people last week who are all going to photograph the Northern Lights, and lots of people were asking me how to take them on their iPhone. And it's totally dark when you go to see the Northern Lights. And the iPhone is not good at focusing, and it's not good at pulling in the light as much as a traditional camera. And you may, if you've ever tried to see a picture at night with an iPhone, you'll often get a message at the top in yellow, and it will say, please hold still, or can you hold still a little bit? It says different depending on which phone. Some say hold still, some say hold steady, depends which iPhone you've got. But essentially, the camera is trying to take a picture over a period of time, which is virtually impossible to get a sharp photograph unless you have a tripod. And you can buy little tripods for your iPhones. We can talk about that another time. But just don't be put off if you try to take a picture at 10 o'clock at night in your kitchen, and it's really dim light and you're struggling. That's not you, that's the iPhone. Okay? So direction and intensity of light. We're going to make sure the light ideally is behind us. And then secondly, we're going to try to make sure that we photograph first 4 hours of the day or last 4 hours of the day. Okay, make sense to everyone? Good. Okay. Next one that goes into the ingredients, composition. We'll look at this in a lot more detail. Composition, the definition of composition is just where do we choose to place things in our photograph. And ideally, good composition, we should be placing things in an optimal place so that the viewer's attention goes to the main subject or the focal point. And there's tons of different compositional guidelines that I can give you to follow. We'll start with a few today just to get us going. The next one is focus. Focus is another huge word in photography. How much or how little of the scene from the front. So like my hand is really near the front, all the way back there is right near the back. How much from the front to the back do we want in focus? And actually there's a word or words for that in photography that we call depth of field. Sometimes you'll see it referred to, if you do any reading, as just DOF. And depth of field refers to how much of our photograph, the strict definition of depth of field, is how much of our photograph from the front to the back is in focus. So what zoom does for me here is zoom gives me what's called a shallow depth of field. Only like this part of me isn't like, if you imagine we took our photograph and like you pulled me out the screen and you made me three-dimensional, and someone was taking a picture of me here and I'm standing here. A shallow depth of field means that only the things inside my pink rectangle are in focus. Everything else is blurry. That's great because it helps draw attention to the focal point, which in this case, I want to be me. Sometimes we want what's called a large depth of field. We want the whole thing in focus. Like a lot of landscape, most landscape photographers, if you're someone who likes photographing big gardens and big fields of flowers or cityscapes or anything where we've got lots of distances between things and we want them all to be sharp, we usually want a large depth of field. So shallow depth of field is just a little bit in focus. Large depth of field is the majority of the photograph in focus. And the truth is we can control that and we can change it depending on what we're taking a photograph of. Remember, I said we're going to do the how next time. Today's all about the why. So don't worry, I'm going to show you how to do it. It just may not be today. Some of you, I think, know how to do it anyway, which will be good. And actually, the blur that's created from a shallow depth of field, I'll just throw this photography word out here as well, because you'll hear it talked about a lot. And if ever you sit on GCA calls and you listen to people judging photographs, they may throw out the word bokeh. B-O-K-E-H. And bokeh just means the aesthetic quality of blur created by a camera lens. It's the very fancy photography way of just saying this blur, the blur that a camera lens creates. We call bokeh.
The aesthetic use of...
Sorry. So it's the aesthetic, the strict definition is it's the aesthetic quality of blur created by a camera's lens. The aesthetic quality of blur created by a camera's lens. And I've sat on tons of GCA like judging calls and listened to them and been to shows, and I've seen the comment again and again and again. Nice job with the bokeh, great bokeh, good job with the bokeh, well done for achieving bokeh. So I just want you to know what the word means because you may see it. It's actually a Japanese word. The reason it got so ingrained in photography is the majority of the main manufacturers of cameras are actually Japanese. Sony, Canon, Nikon. So that's where the word comes from. It's really got more mainstream since digital photography got more popular about 20 years ago. So shallow depth of fields, large depth of fields, how much is in or out of focus. When we have little bits in focus, we create this blur. This blur is called bokeh. We'll talk about that a lot, but focus is another thing that goes in our toolkit or goes into our ingredients. If you think about baking a cake is like creating a photograph. These are all, everything on my list here is ingredients that go into creating more powerful imagery. Movement is a very powerful one. Usually in photography, we can do two things with movement. Actually, we can do lots of shades in between, but two main things. We can stop movement dead. Maybe you have a hummingbird come into a feeder and you want to be able to see the wings and you want to be able to see its beak and you want to be able to see it. We can freeze it, make it look like it's not moving. on the same thing, we can also show movement. We can show periods of time. We can show beautiful water coming over a waterfall. We can show waves crashing against a beach. We can show the motion of, I can't remember which one of you, but one of you who said you're going to the Daytona. We can show the movement of cars like over, in fact, I'll show you for the benefit of the person going to Daytona. Let me just show you. So when I say so this is showing movement of a race car. Now you can all do this with your iPhone. I just need to teach you how to do it. And it may be showing movement of a race car, or it may be showing movement of a waterfall. Like, let's just use this one. That's showing movement over time, a period of time of the water flowing. Lots of people use this with their pets. I'll just put in dog just to show you. So here's two examples. Actually, it's really good. This is showing movement. This is freezing movement. Two different types of. In fact, for those of you who like dogs, there's a really good book someone once bought me. I think it's called Splash. I'll have a look. I'll tell you now. But no, not Splash. No, it's good. It's called Shake. And it's this book here. And this photographer just took all these dogs, got them to shake and froze movement as they were shaking. And they got tons of interesting and abstract pictures of dogs pulling really funny faces, but it's just the dog shaking, and as it shook, we froze the moment in time. Oh, look, someone's dog appreciates that. I can hear someone bark. I got the puppy vote of approval. So so this is a good example of how we can show movement. For those of you who've got dogs or pets, you know when a dog shakes, it's very quick. But we're just freezing a split second of that moment. And that could be a flower blowing in the wind. That could be race cars. It could be people walking down the street. It doesn't matter. The truth is, everything in the world moves at some point. It moves a little bit. There's few exceptions, like, I don't know, your dinner tonight will not be moving. But whenever we think about movement in photography, we also have to think about, hold on, let me just get back up here. We have to think about usually not only is what the subject is doing, that's the race car, that's the dog, that's the flower blowing in the wind, but what are we doing? Are we in a car? Are we in an aeroplane? Are we on a boat? Are we on a wobbly bridge? A lot of the time, are we walking and taking a picture? A lot of the time you're moving. And I need to teach you, first of all, you need to appreciate that movement is important. And then I need to teach you about how we cope with things or scenarios where either the subject is moving or you are moving. I cannot tell you how many times I sit on airplanes and I watch people take pictures out of the window with their iPhones, and they're always doing it wrong. I'm never going to be rude and touch on their shoulder and say, excuse me, you're doing it wrong. But if ever you've tried to take pictures as the plane's going over like a desert or mountains and you've tried to take a picture, 5 times out of 10 on an iPhone, those pictures will come out blurry. And I want to make sure 10 out of 10, you get them sharp. And the reason they're coming out blurry is because the plane is moving at 400 miles an hour. Lots of people do this off cruise ships. They go on boats and cruise ships and things, and they try to take pictures, and then they wonder why their pictures are a little bit blurry. And it's because inherently they're moving. But I need to teach you how to do that. But that's to come. We'll do that in a subsequent lesson. For the time being, I just want us to appreciate that movement is important. The next one on my list is emotion. I've kind of already talked about, right? It's making us feel something when we look at our picture. Now, I've purposely missed a few off here. Let's ask Muffy. Any other ideas of what could go into making good photographs? I'll give you a clue. What is and my Gatorade bottle fell on the floor here, so let me, what's the difference between the Gatorade bottle and me? Primarily. It's almost so.
Well, the bottle is blurry.
It's blurry. Okay, yeah, good. Focus. What else? What's even more obvious? What's the difference between this in the Gatorade bottle and my face or my sweater?
Well, you're in the middle.
Good. You're
The
overthinking it.
The composition is not.
Good. Composition we've already got. It's even simpler than that. It's just color. They're just two different colors, right? My face
Right.
and my face. And color is I've missed it off on purpose. It's one of the most common ones, but I just wanted us to think about it. So we're going to add to our list color. I can't remember who it was, but whoever at the beginning, when I asked about that Rhine picture, told me texture. We're going to add texture to our list. So these are all our ingredients that go into making good photographs. We're going to add perspective, because we've talked about that one already. So that can go on our list. And I think that's a pretty good start of the elements that go into creating better photography. And one thing I'll say is, especially with an intro class, is I'm aware that I'm throwing tons of information at you today. Lots of different things. I'm just hoping that some of it sticks. You can, if 30% of it sticks, 50% of it sticks, 60% of it sticks, doesn't matter. Go and look at the recording, review. But the key is that you don't have to use all of these every time you take a photograph. The key is sometimes it's just one. Sometimes it's 2 or 3 on the list. Sometimes it is a combination of 4 or 5 of them. As you get better and as you practice, what will happen more subconsciously, you won't have to think about it so much, is a lot of these things you will just see and be like, oh, the lighting's good here. The composition is good. Oh, I want to freeze the movement and I love the color. Because let's just imagine there's blues and yellows, which are complementary colors, or there's reds and greens. And you start, and it doesn't become so forced, it becomes more instinctive. And that's the hardest bit is at the beginning, because at the beginning, there's tons of thinking. It's kind of like when you learn to drive a car and you have to think, oh my God, I have to put my foot on the gas and I have to turn a wheel at the same time. Like, how can I do this? But everyone who now knows how to drive a car, you don't even think twice. You just do it instinctively. Photography is the same. So to that point, actually, and some of you would have heard me say this before, but for those of you who haven't, and even for those of you who have, feel free to rewrite it down. I always say every good photographer needs 4 Ps, as in the letter. Perspective is one. We've talked about that. Practice. Kind of talked about that. I'm going to set you a homework to get you to practice. Perseverance. Like, don't give up. At the beginning, it's very easy to think, oh my God, this is all too difficult. Oh my God, this is all too much to think about. I promise, hold me to it, that I don't think I've ever taught someone who hasn't got to the point. And my hope is by the end of these 4 classes, you'll be close to that point where things are starting to happen, especially because we're spacing out the classes a little bit. Things are starting to happen instinctively. And then the last one is patience. Again, sounds easy, but is one of the hardest ones. Like, if we just stop for a minute and think, what's the best way to photograph this rose? Is it from over here? Is it from over here? Where's the lighting coming from? Or if you want to take a really example that people run into the whole time, people are taking pictures of their friends or family and there's an annoying person right behind them. Or there's a palm tree growing out of someone's head. Like, the patience to just think about that, take a second before you take the picture. Usually it's easier for us to move as the photographers than getting our subjects to move. Like, it's very hard if you're taking a group of people saying, can you just move a bit to the left? Can you move a bit to the right? It's much easier for us to just take one step to our right or one step to our left. But being patient is a big thing in photography. A lot of people actually find photography very mindful. They find it very therapeutic. They enjoy the process. So I'd encourage you to really lean into the process. Don't be in a rush. Find something to photograph that you like and take your time with it. Not only is that going to help you learn, but it's going to help you practice better patience when it comes to your photography. So for those of you, just in case you didn't get it, perspective, practice, I may be doing them the wrong way around here. Perspective, practice, perseverance, and patience. I think that's the list I gave you in that order. Good. Okay, so let's get a little bit more practical. And let's talk about, we've talked about lighting, so let's talk about composition. Okay. So good quote here from a friend of mine who's a photographer that says, beauty can be seen in all things. Seeing and composing is what separates the snapshot from the photograph. And that's to say that exactly kind of what I was talking about. We have to be able to see and move rather than just be the person who's a point and shooter. There's a reason they're called point and shoot cameras, because they just go move on, move on, move on. We don't want to do that. Okay. So how can we compose better? Tons of different ways that I can teach you this. But let's start at the very, very simple way. Yeah, probably 50% of you are going to know this. 50% of you aren't going to know this, but let's make sure that everyone knows it the same. So show of hands, just for my benefit. I know I recognize somebody. Just who knows the rule of thirds from either my lessons or from other things? Okay. So we're about 50% don't know it. So we need to make sure we cover it. So if you open the camera, if you open your phone and you go to the settings on your phone, which looks like the gears or the cogs, and you go down to camera. When you go down to camera, under settings, it's quite far down. You have to scroll down to get to it. When you click on camera, I'm going to do it with you to make sure we're all in the same place. And then when you click on camera, again, if you scroll down, you're going to see like a subheading that says composition. And under there, there's going to be two things that I want you to turn on if they're not turned on. And by turning on, you just tap to the right and you're going to make it green. One is the grid. And the second one is the level. The level one may be new for some of you, actually, because this is relatively new. They updated the iPhone about 3 months ago, and they added this feature that never used to be there. It may be turned on for most of you, but if it's not turned on, please turn it on to help us keep our photos straight. Did everyone manage? Just let me make sure did everyone manage to get there?
I don't have that yet.
You don't have the level thing?
So I go to camera under the settings.
Yeah.
And then you said to go to composition. Mine doesn't list composition.
Okay, you should see the word grid though. Can you see the word grid? Grid, G-R-I-D.
And it just all the way, I mean, yes, I do. It's on.
It's on. Perfect. That's all I'm asking.
Okay. And levels on as well. Sorry about that.
And if you look in light gray above it, you should see the word composition to the left. It's kind of hard to see, but it's probably there. If it's not there, don't worry. Doesn't matter. It's just a heading to help you. Now,
I see that now. Yes. Okay. I got it. Thank you.
Don't worry. You're good. So if you now flick up, come out of the settings and go back to your camera. Okay. You're going to see a grid that looks like this. Okay. And the reason this grid is there, and it's on pretty much every camera that exists on the planet, is to help you compose in this thing called the rule of thirds. And what the rule of thirds dictates is that we take a frame, whether portrait or horizontal or landscape, and we split it into 9 quadrants with 4 lines, 2 horizontal lines and 2 vertical lines. Generally, and I hate that it's the rule of thirds, because honestly, there's no rules in photography. There are no rules. Everything's a guideline. Rules makes photography sound like a science, and it's not a science, it's an art form. But it's taught as the rule of thirds. I always teach it to people as the rule of thirds if they want to go away. But the rule of thirds dictates that generally we want to have our focal point, our subject, lying along one of these black lines. I'm going to show you tons of examples in a minute. And ideally, we want to have it where these lines meet at one of these red circles. Feel free to shout out, those of you who've taken my class before. Can anyone remember what those red circles are called?
Focal points?
No, so this is a good refresher for everyone.
Well, are they focal points?
No, they're called nodal points.
Nodal.
Knew it started with an N.
Yeah, it's okay. So, and what we tried to do, it's kind of confusing. We tried to put the focal points onto the nodal points. So
That's why I confused them.
Yeah. So focal point is the main subject. We try to put the main subject on one of these lines.
Right.
And ideally where they meet, where the horizontal meets the vertical, which we call the nodal points. Okay. And that's why you have the grid on your iPhone. You have it to help you compose better. That's right then. I want you all to keep it on for the time being. Eventually we take it off as we get better. But for the time being, we definitely want to have it on as a guide. So let's look at the rule of thirds in person or in practice. Carol, where does your eye go in this picture?
To Mick's eye.
Goes right to Mick Jagger's eyes. Now, it helps that I put a giant red circle over his eyes. But also, when I took this picture a while ago. I took this picture, when did I take this? 2010. Yeah, he was like in his late 60s when I took this picture. And he hated this picture, by the way. He said it made him look too old. So I had to fight with him to release it because I thought it would really like showed a face well lived. But what I did when I took this picture is I did a number of things to correspond with the rule of thirds. I offset him to the left, 2/3, 1/3 of the frame in, as in his whole torso, his head and his shoulders and his chest. But then I also put his eyes, and his eyes are the focal point here, 2/3 of the way up the frame, which meant they lay right on that nodal point. That's kind of interesting because we learned towards the beginning of the class today that usually our eye would go to the highlight. It's this, that's all the bright stuff. But when I asked Carol, and I'd hope for most of you, when I pulled this picture up very quickly and you look at it, you go straight to Mick Jagger. And that's the power of the rule of thirds. I'm going to show you it. So off to the left, slightly up, his eyes. It's interesting. Once I teach people the rule of thirds, it's very hard to unsee it. You'll see this if you watch the news. You'll see this on movies. You'll see it in TV shows. You'll see it when you're in the grocery store. You'll see it on websites. You'll see it used again and again and again and again, where generally I'm looking at Meredith's got like a landscape behind her over her right shoulder, and it looks like she's got 2/3 of the frame is like the landscape, 1/3 is the sky. Carol's got like a watering can image or something behind her. Again, it's like the way it's composed is with the rule of thirds. So you see it again and again and again. It's very hard to unsee it once you see it. Like Jean's got an owl behind her, and her owl is 2/3 of the way up the frame, not right in the middle, kind of like with Mick Jagger's eyes. So let's look at this one. This one I haven't turned the grid on. Carrie, where do your eyes go in this picture? You'll need to unmute yourself.
They go to Leo's face, but also to the space between his face and the swan.
Yeah, good. So this is a very famous portrait photographer you've probably heard. Most of you have heard of her, called Annie Leibovitz. Her name's on there if you want to write it down. You can look her up. She does amazing work, mostly celebrity portraits. But she has done the opposite of what I did here. But she's just put Leonardo DiCaprio to the right. He's 2/3 of the way across. So if I draw my lines on, and he's 2/3 of the way up the frame. He's right on the nodal point. Now, most people who've never had a photography lesson, or I would say who aren't thinking about creating pictures, take this picture like this. They just put it right in the middle and they make it nice and big. Now, I would argue that when you look at a picture like this, that this photograph actually lacks a focal point. I think you kind of look at his eyes, you kind of look at his hair, you kind of look at you look at the swan, you kind of look at the background. Look at the difference between this one and this one. Look how much more you get sucked into his eyes and his face I hope so, on this one, even though he's smaller. a common misconception is I've just got to make something bigger and therefore it will be more obvious in my picture. Sometimes that doesn't work. Sometimes it works, but sometimes it doesn't work. But the key here, and again, I'm going to show you this amongst lots of different genres of photography, is that we want to offset our subject to the left or the right. Very rarely, although I'm very aware that I showed you that Peter Lick picture with the light coming in the canyon, very rarely do we want to put something smack bang in the middle of our picture. Like I'm looking over Anne's shoulder and I'm seeing she's got a landscape behind her and it looks like, I'm not sure if it's a lighthouse or a tower. There's like a red structure coming out. That's right on the rule of thirds line. And that's intentional by the painter, whoever did that. So like if we put her grid to it, it would almost be on the nodal point. So you see this again and again and again. And it's something I need you guys to understand. Here's some magazine covers that I pulled. You'll see the rule of thirds. I'll actually go past these pretty quickly. I'm going to jump straight to this one. A lot of time, we want to make sure we put our subject on the left or the right of our frame. Interestingly, in Western culture, because we read left to right, and you see this a lot when people try to sell you things, they'll put the thing they're trying to sell you on the left-hand side because we read photographs left to right. How we read text. If we went to an Aramaic culture, you'd see it's the other way around. Text is read right to left, the other way around. If we went to China or any Asian culture where text is read from top to bottom, usually the main thing that they're trying to sell you is at the top of the picture. It's kind of how we're culturally ingrained to look at it. But the reason I'm showing you this picture is often if we have a flower or a bird or an animal or a person and they're facing a certain way, we want to leave them room to look into the frame. This we call in photography negative space. So we usually want to leave the negative space. One of you's, I'm not sure who it is, but I just want to make sure it's not distracting for the group. Just be careful with, I think one of you may be near your microphone or just like rustling a piece of paper occasionally. So just be careful. I just don't want it to be distracting to everyone. So if that is you, just feel free to mute yourself if you can. So the negative space here, the hummingbird is along the left line, looking into the negative space. Now the bird of paradise is helping again take you up to the hummingbird. But this would look really weird if the hummingbird was over here looking out and all the negative space was behind it. Here's my terrible picture of a hummingbird. That's a stick hummingbird. There it is. There's my hummingbird. So does that hopefully that makes sense to everyone? Good. So we want to be conscious of that. And that's another way that we can use the rule of thirds. It's another way to use it. Let's ask Jean. If you can take yourself off mute. Which one of these, Jean, of these two little girls, it's the same picture, it's just different composition. Which one do you think is better?
The one on the right.
Excellent. Very good. The one on the right is better. The one on the right is better because there's less distractions. There's no picnic blanket. There's no like stuff in the back. But more importantly, the one on the right, the girl is more, even though she's relatively centered, her eyes are 2/3 of the way up in the frame. Notice, same as the hummingbird, she's looking into the negative space.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it feels like that. And again, you see GCA judges use this the whole time. They'll say, not enough room for the subject to breathe, not enough negative space. This is often the fault that the person has got wrong who took the picture. Same with this picture. Look at this one. Let's ask Cassidy on this one. Cassidy, what position do you think I'm in when I took this photograph? You need to unmute yourself. How do you think I'm standing? I don't want to give way too
You're at her level. You're down.
Really good. I'm sitting on the floor. So I've combined two things. I've done rule of thirds. If we think about baking a cake, right? Or building Lego blocks, here I've taken rule of thirds as one of my tools. and I've taken perspective as another. Now there's focus and there's color, and there's like the girl's wearing a similar color to the lavender, like she's in focus. There's a shallow depth of field. There's the bokeh going on behind her. But for what we're talking about right now, well done, Cassidy. I have got down to her level. And for those of you who have pets or have kids or have grandkids or anyone who's small, we want as best we can to get down to their level. If you take a picture of a dog or a cat and you're looking down on them, you don't create that emotional engagement with the viewer. We want to be on their level. And that's, again, makes it just that simple. Look, I see so many people take pictures of their dogs and they take it because they're standing up and they're looking down on their dogs. Mm-hmm. They take the same picture of their dog and their dog's lying on the sofa like this, and they just get down to the dog's level and look into the dog's eyes or the cat's eyes or whatever the pet is, or it straight away creates a more powerful image. So here, yes, I've used composition. I've used the rule of thirds. Let's ask, who haven't we? Let's ask Shirley. Shirley, just as a reminder, can you remind the group, what's it called where these 2 points meet?
The nodal.
Very good. So I've put her face, much like we did with Mick Jagger, much like Annie Leibovitz did with Leonardo DiCaprio, on the nodal points. Good. Excellent. Anyone? I'm just going to pause for a minute. Has anyone got any questions on any of it? Good. That means I'm doing my job properly. Good, good, good. Okay, so look at this one. This one's a really beautiful flower. I mean, I'm going to say this is a simple picture. It's not that simple because there's focus, there's a very shallow depth of field, but the flower has intentionally been put on the right of the frame. It's not 2/3 up. It doesn't matter. It doesn't always have to be. Remember, I said there's no rules, but it's not smack bang in the middle. Now, sometimes smack bang in the middle works, especially for something we'll talk about, symmetry, which we'll go into more detail later or another time. But most of the time, when you see a professional looking photograph, this monarch butterfly, a perfect example, the monarch butterfly is offset to the right. It's the same as the hummingbird picture I showed you. It's just the other way around. And the monarch butterfly is looking into the negative space. Now, interestingly, this monarch butterfly is backlit. The light is coming from behind. It's coming from like 1 o'clock into the camera. This is harder to take. I didn't say it was impossible, but it's harder. But that, especially when you have things that are like translucent, flowers a lot of the time, petals, a butterfly, when we get the light shining through it, it can look very interesting and very effective. But the key here that I want you to focus on is that I've purposely offset to the right, looking into the negative space. Same here. This one I throw in here because I think it's really interesting. So again, let's ask Anne. I know Anne, you've probably seen this. Anne's there. So Anne, when I pull this up very quickly, where's the first place your eye goes? Now you've had too long to think about it. I want to know very quickly. Let's try again. Just where do you think it goes? Straight away. Oh, you're on mute. Sorry. If you could just take yourself off mute, that would be great. Don't worry. Let's go to Jan.
Lower bucket of daisies.
Good. And that's interesting, right? Because the more you look at this picture, which is why I didn't want you to look at it for ages and then give me answers, then you start to see the sun. But the power of the rule of thirds actually means you don't see the really bright highlight first and you see the daisies. Again, notice I've got down to the daisies level. I've changed.
That's the way I noticed, I think.
Yeah. And the perspective is now there's lovely like light and focus and relatively shallow depth of field in that the daisies are very sharp and the plant pot is out of focus, is blurry. But the key is that I've offset them to the right. Okay. Now this works for landscape photography as well. In landscape photography, usually we're dealing with two main elements and this is true if you go out and photograph your gardens this afternoon. You're usually dealing with the foreground, which is the stuff at the front. That's the garden. And then you're usually dealing with the background, which is either the thing behind the flower or it's the sky. So in this instance, I have 2/3 foreground. That's all of this. And I have 1/3 sky. The telltale sign, another telltale sign of someone who's never had a photography lesson, is when they take pictures of landscapes, they put the horizon right through the middle. And that often makes a photograph seem like it's almost two separate photographs that don't really go with each other. It's like each part, each half could be a distinctive photograph, but they don't feel, I haven't used this word yet, but another good word that we use a lot in photography is balance. We look for balanced compositions. It's kind of the same as if you were looking for balance in interior design or balance in floral design. Like things have to kind of offset each other so that not one thing overwhelms something else. And the rule of thirds is helpful in us doing that. Now, this picture, the drama where I wanted you to eventually get to is, I'll use a different color here. It's up here in the top left-hand corner. That's the interest. Look at that lovely lighting on the clouds and on the rocks. The composition is simply serving as a way, especially as you follow the shoreline, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but you subconsciously follow the shoreline 2/3 of the way into the picture and up to the rocks and the clouds that are lying along that top left-hand nodal point up here. Hopefully you can all see that. Let me show you one without the grid. Okay, let's ask Jan on this one. Quickly, Jan, where does your eye go?
Right to the sun.
Good. Tell me why.
First, it's on a nodal, and second, you've got leading lines taking your eye there.
Very good. Can you tell me where the leading lines are you see, please?
Yep, they're at the nodal. One is coming in from the right of the photograph, upper right towards the sun. The other one is the line of rocks right in the center that leads your eye to the sun.
Excellent. Very good. Good. So firstly, well done. Yeah. So and look at the movement of the water here as well. You can see the movement of the water. Don't worry about that so much. The most important thing that Jan correctly identified here is number one, I put the sun on a nodal point. I put it 2/3. Oh, let's get a better pen than that. 2/3, 1/3 of the way up the frame. So 2/3, 1/3, but also 2/3 of the way this way. So it's right on that point. The second thing that Jan correctly identified is I'm starting to introduce another concept here that goes hand in hand with the rule of thirds, which is something called leading lines. Leading. Leading like this, as if you're like leading someone down a path. And let's define leading lines for everyone. So leading lines in most art, but let's just call it in photography, leading lines are a compositional device that takes the viewer's attention, or I shouldn't say that takes the viewer's attention. So they're a compositional device that help take the viewer's attention to the main focal point. So here, I moved to a place where I saw that the rocks and the sun were going to line up with each other. That's very intentional. I did it on purpose. It's not by luck, it's not accident, but I had to think about it to do it. So here we're combining, and there's tons of different types of leading lines. I'm going to introduce a few today. But leading lines are everywhere. There's 100 in each room that you're sitting in. They're outside in your yards. They're on your street. They're in the mall, they're at the beach, they're everywhere. You just have to know to look for them. And leading lines are a very, very powerful tool we have at our disposal. Remember, really good photography is done with intention. We want to intentionally take people's eyes to the focal points. The rule of thirds helps us do that. And leading lines is an additional tool that usually goes hand in hand with the rule of thirds, but not always, that also helps achieve that objective. Okay, does that make sense to anyone? Does anyone have any questions? Okay, good. So look at this picture. So this is actually how most people would take this picture. In fact, most people, I probably would actually go even further and they just zoom in with their iPhone and they just take the picture of the sun. Kind of like the Leonardo DiCaprio picture that I showed you, I think that this lacks a focal point. You kind of wonder, look at the difference between this one and this one. Look how much more you feel like that. This one just feels more dynamic. It feels like there's more movement, more energy. Movement, a big word we already mentioned. But here you kind of just like, you kind of look at the sun and you kind of get stuck. And you kind of wonder at the rocks. This is what I would call sloppy composition. This is thought out, both in terms of combining the rule of thirds and the leading lines. Everyone see that, the difference in those two? Good. Okay, so let's look at this one. This is relatively local to you guys, not to some of you. This is Miami Beach. But here I'm just showing that I've done it the other way around. So here I've done 1/3 foreground, 2/3 sky. It's the opposite of what I just did on that photo with the sun, which was taken in Maui. And we often do this when we have big dramatic skies. A lot of the time, especially this time of year, winter, where it's cloudy and we don't have bright blue skies the whole time, and we've got like the big imposing storm clouds, sometimes we want to capture that. And if we fill the majority of the photo, in fact, I'm going to jump just to a picture here and then I'm going to come back to this one. I took this like 3 weeks ago in San Francisco, longer than that now, actually. I took it before the holidays, just about probably 5 weeks ago in San Francisco. And I was like, wow, this is an amazing sunset. And the reason I liked it is because of the colors. And I'm like, here's the Golden Gate Bridge and here's Alcatraz down at the bottom. They're on a nodal point. Look down there, they're on a nodal point. But to me, the focal point of this picture was the sky, was the colors in the sky. So I wanted to fill the frame as much as I could with the sky while leaving a little bit of land foreground at the bottom for context, just so you know what's going on. Otherwise, you just have a picture of the sky. It wouldn't be as interesting. Interestingly, this was luck, not judgment, but look how the lines help draw you down to the bridge. Mm-hmm. Now, I didn't plan that. That was just luck. But I still, when I stood there, had to compose it in such a way where the whole thing felt well put together. So I would definitely encourage you, if I was teaching you in the summer, I know you get storms on the East Coast in the summer, but especially this time of year, we really get interesting clouds, very interesting cloud formations. Take advantage of that. We also, a lot of the time this time of year, get cloudy days, like you guys have probably got today. And cloudy days leads to what we call softer, more diffused light. It's a very different type of light. It's a very soft light. It can make our photographs feel very like gentle and fragile and pretty and beautiful. A cloudy day is actually a great day to photograph people or portraits or flowers. A lot of the time, professional portrait photographers, when they're photographing people, they look for shade because the sun is too harsh. So a day like today, where it's overcast and cloudy, I think I looked at the weather on the East Coast, for most of you guys, it's going to work to those advantage, and you're going to get that a lot this time of year. Let's take a look. If we come back here, where's the picture I wanted to show you? There we go. Sorry, there. Look how I've set the flowers on each one of these to correspond with the rule of thirds. I'll just start drawing the lines on so you can see. They're all different, but each one of these adheres to the rule of thirds. Want you to really start to, and I've changed my perspective. Okay. Let's go back to this picture here, and let me ask, who have not I called on? Let's ask Judy. And I probably left this picture up too long now. But Judy, if you can unmute yourself, tell me, where does your eye first go when you look at that picture?
Actually, it goes in the middle to the person walking up the hill. The leading lines led me to that.
Very good, exactly. And now this, you're right, the person is in the middle. But the fact that the person is in the middle, it's still a rule of thirds picture. Because
yes, it is, because it's in the upper.
You got it, because it's 2/3, 1/3. The interesting reason why I like showing this picture is because almost everyone's attention gets pulled to this person that is a tiny percentage of the picture, maybe 1% of the picture. They're tiny in the context of this massive field and these trees, but we get drawn there, as Judy correctly identified, because we have this strong leading line. And this is the most common type of leading line. It looks like a triangle. It looks like a triangle like this. But if we turn it upside down, triangle, it's a V. And this type of line is called a vanishing point. Write it down if you didn't know it. And these are everywhere. And it's the strength of the vanishing point here. Plus, Carrie, where do you think I'm standing when I took this picture?
I think you're standing just in the middle.
Yeah, you're thinking, yeah, but what height am I at? Am I higher?
Kneeling.
Yeah, I'm not even, yeah, I'm just a tiny bit down. Exactly. And by me dropping lower, I've emphasized the size of the vanishing point, made it feel larger. The road looks huge. And that's helping, remember, a leading line compositional device to take us where we want the viewer's attention to go. Anything that I can do to emphasize that leading line. And in this case, it was drop it. So here we've got 3 things in our ingredients. I mean, there's more things, but 3 things we've learned about so far. We've got rule of thirds, we've got changing our perspective, and now we've got leading lines. 3 things straight away that if I asked you the question, what makes this a good photo, I hope you could now answer. Now, what's kind of interesting here is I haven't shown you what's over the top of the hill. And I've done that on purpose. If I was painting this, for those of you who like other art forms, if I was painting this, I'd have a canvas and I'd be getting my paints and I'd be painting onto the canvas and I'd be painting the scene. If I was sketching it, I'd be drawing onto the charcoal or drawing onto the piece of paper or using charcoal on paper, and I'd be adding the charcoal, adding the colors, adding the pencil. Generally, art is a form, this is the most art school I'll get on you guys. Generally, art is a process or an exercise in addition. What do we add to our canvas, our substrate? For those of you who do floral design, you're adding stems and plants and leaves and whatever to make up an interesting design. Photography, and this is a really powerful mindset shift to understand, photography is the only art form that is the inverse thought process. Good photography, really good photography, is all about exclusion rather than addition. It's all about what do we choose to take out of our frame rather than what do we choose to include. And often by leaving stuff out, we actually tell a greater story. And we tell a greater story because we leave more up to the viewer's interpretation. For example, here, because I haven't shown you what's over the hill, has this person ran out of gas? Is their truck just over the other side of the hill? Are they just walking through a farmland? Is there a big city over there? Like, we don't know. And by leaving that open, I make you ask questions. And you see this done in lots of good photography. Generally, photography is a discipline or an artistic exercise in distilling the complexity of the world around us. We live in a chaotic world. Like everywhere we go, there's a million. You walk in the grocery store and try to take pictures in the grocery store. There's like a million things you could take pictures of. The question is, what do we just want to hone in on? We often call them vignettes, just small scenes. You hear it talked a lot in GCA. You'll hear a lot. Sometimes they'll talk about intimate landscapes. And an intimate landscape is a landscape where you can't see the horizon. And they call them intimate landscapes. And they encourage you to do that to force you to think about, what do I want to show and what do I not want to show? What can I exclude? And that mind shift, thinking about what do I take out of my frame rather than what I put into your frame, is a really big thing in helping you take photographs. Does that make sense to everyone?
Mhm.
Good. So, and I'll tell you from having the privilege of judging hundreds of photography competitions over the last 20 years, the number one most common thing I see is the want for the photographer to want to show everything. And sometimes when we show everything, we actually show nothing because we're lacking any type of focal point. And there's no balance, and there's no structure, and there's no depth. And it's just like, and it's really tempting when we stand in a beautiful place. And sometimes we do want to show a lot of it, but showing everything is usually a mistake. Not always, but usually. And I'll say even to that point, that when you think about, before you push your buttons to take a picture, and I'm going to give you an assignment in a minute to think about, if we're thinking about what do we take out of our pictures, I want you to always check the edges of the frame. And I want you to check the edges of your frame before you take a picture, because especially now I've taught you the rule of thirds and I've started to introduce leading lines and lots of the other things that we've talked about today. Often, I used one example, like a tree growing up someone's head, but often we see like hands or arms or distracting things around the outside. I'll tell you, GCA judges hate that from my experience of what I've seen. And they often pick up if there's something distracting in the corner up here. But it's very easy to lose sight of that when you're very fixated on rule of thirds, vanishing point, where the light's coming from. So please remember, just before you take your pictures, to check the edges of your frame. And ideally, what I don't want you to have to do, I haven't brought this up yet today, but I'm a big proponent in getting things as right as you can when you take the picture. I don't want you saying, well, it's okay, like I got all of that and I'll just crop it afterwards. Because actually, when we crop it afterwards, we lose quality. If you imagine each of your iPhones, I'll just imagine this is an iPhone picture. And this, you take this picture and it's, let's just make up simple math. It's 20 megapixels. If I then say, oh, actually, I want to crop in and I only want to use half this picture, I'm straight away going to 10 megapixels. And if I say, actually, I only want to use 25% of this picture, I'm then down to 5 megapixels, and that's like an iPhone 1. That's like going back 20 years. You're just going to lose the quality completely. You won't be able to do anything with it. You couldn't even print it as a 6x4. You'd have it as a tiny little thumbnail. So that comes back to what I was talking about in terms of moving with your feet, perspective, get into the right place. And sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes we're taking a picture of a bird on a tree and it's miles away and we can't get close. But if we can do, I really want you to try and get the picture in the camera as you want it. That's going to force you to think about the framing, and it's going to force you to think about the composition, rather than relying on cropping afterwards, which I'd rather, if we can avoid it, we don't have to do. Okay, 2 things there. So I'll just summarize to make sure everyone's clear. 1, photography is all about what do we take out? The process of exclusion. We don't want to necessarily show everything. Usually showing only a portion of something as opposed to the whole thing leaves more up to the viewer's interpretation, which is good. We want people to look at our pictures and be interested and be engaged and take a look at them and think, what's going on there? What's happening? There's a story. If we give it all away, there's no mystique. Second one is we want to check our edges of our frame. Let's be mindful when we do our compositions, as well as understanding the rule of thirds. Like, let's watch out for things leaning in, leaning out, arms, distracting things, lots of times I see it's like branches of a tree. They're just like someone hasn't looked and all they had to do was move half a step to their left and the tree was gone, but it's like coming in from here. Okay. Anyone got any questions on that?
Yes.
Go for it.
I have a question. First a comment and then a question. I heard from a GCA judge recently a very catchy phrase for what you were saying about mind your edges, and that is use the border patrol.
I like that one. Yeah. I may steal that. I've never heard that. That's very good. Yeah.
And then the other thing is a question. I'm entering some black and white photos in a club show.
Yeah.
Next week, and the theme is looking up. So it's sort of intriguing.
Yeah.
I had cropped the pictures and then I went to print them in the 8x10 format requested. And I find the final product is not 8x10.
Yeah.
Is there any way to cure that? Can I go to 11x14 and see what happens, or
Yeah,
is it
so you're referring to something called the aspect ratio, and the aspect ratio is natively what comes out of an iPhone is 2 long, 3 wide, or the other way around, 3 long. So it's what's called a 3x2, which is why 6x4 is the most popular size that people print photos, like beginners, and because it keeps it in the same aspect ratio. If you veer away from that 8x10, like 5x7, then sometimes what you see on your screen is not necessarily going to be in what you get when you print. The easiest way around that is to do it on the computer afterwards. There's a way that you can crop it that I'm not going to have time to get to today. Email me about it, Anne, and I'll follow up with you. But there's a way that I can show everyone to do it on the iPhone, but it's not going to necessarily, we can't jump between like a 5x7 and 8x10 and 11x14. The only way to be able to control that aspect ratio, I mean exactly what you see on screen is what you get, is by doing it on the computer. And I can.
Okay. Thank you.
Good. Okay. So I've been umming and ahhing whether I'm going to give you this theme, because I know some of you would have had this already, but I actually am going to give it to you again, because I want you to do it again now for those of you who've heard this lesson twice, or a variance of it. The theme that I'm going to give you all is very general. It's just lines. That's it. I don't want to give too much away. But I want you to think about is all those ingredients. Go back and look at we haven't covered all of them. We'll finish covering them next lesson. But primarily, I want you to think about leading lines. I want you to think about rule of thirds. I want you to think about exclusion rather than inclusion. I want you to think about vanishing points. I want you to think about lighting. I want you to think about perspective. Lots of different things that we've covered a lot today. And please, as I mentioned at the start of the class, I'll send a reminder to everyone, but if you can try and send me at least 24 hours before the class, it just means I have time to then review them. Please try not to send them to me 1 minute before you log on to the Zoom for the class. It just means I just don't have time to be able to take a look at them and put them into the slideshow that I want to present to all of you. But very good. Let me stop the